Good morning, Brew Daily Show. I'm Neal Freyman.
And I'm Toby Howell.
Today, Trump wants to scrap New York City's congestion pricing plan, but can he?
Then Apple added a new cheap iPhone to its lineup, but it's what's under the hood that has investors excited. It's Thursday, February 20th. Let's ride.
Good morning. If it were 2009, our Facebook wall would be pouring in with messages from randos because it is our birthday. Morning Brew Daily is turning to today. On our first episode, way back in 2023, some topics we covered were Meta charging for verification, Biden taking a train trip, and ice cover on the Great Lakes. A real scintillating debut from your boys. Thank you so much to all the OGs who've been listening since that first episode, and to everyone who has hopped on the bandwagon since. It is a real privilege to be able to do this for 2 years now. And Toby, I'm pretty excited about being two. Lots of key milestones to hit. We should be able to say at least 2 words together, walk up a few stairs without help, and eat from a spoon.
Time flies when you're saying, let's ride. I will spare you all my rendition of happy birthday. Instead, just pass along how thankful Neal and I and the whole team is for you guys. From the literal day oneers who comment on every YouTube video to our brand new listeners, you all are what make MBD MBD. Now let's go and party. And by party, I mean tell you about today's sponsor, which is LinkedIn Ads. Neal and I were golfing the other day, yes, in February, and we saw this guy on the range.
He was just firing balls out left and right. Wouldn't even stop to aim, just swing, 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 swing. Made the whole round a disaster because he wouldn't even look at where he was hitting the ball on the course. It was ready, fire, aim.
It's the exact wrong way to golf and the exact wrong way to run ad campaigns.
Just like taking a moment to center yourself before a golf swing will lead to better outcomes, using LinkedIn Ads to target your audience by industry, company, and role will prevent ad waste and get your company in front of the right people.
Man, I am still mad at that dude for ruining a lovely February round. If you're interested in testing out LinkedIn Ads, LinkedIn will give you a $100 credit on your next campaign. Just go to linkedin.com/MBD. That's linkedin.com/MBD. Terms and conditions apply only on LinkedIn Ads.
Long live the king. That's what President Trump declared when he announced that he was killing congestion pricing in New York City. Yesterday, his transportation department rescinded its approval of the city's new tolling system, which would bar New York's Metropolitan Transportation Authority from collecting tolls. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy called the plan a slap in the face to working-class Americans and small business owners, echoing critics who called it a tax on drivers. It's been about a month and a half since New York's first of its kind congestion pricing plan went into effect, which charges most vehicles $9 to enter the core of Manhattan at peak times. The goal was to clean up the air, reduce car traffic in busy areas, and fund $15 billion worth of transit projects. And so far, it seemed to have been working. Drivers are saving about 20 to 30 minutes traveling into central Manhattan, while about 1.2 million fewer vehicles entered the area in January compared to a year earlier. But unlike the Newsies, Trump may have been too quick to declare himself king of New York. In a lawsuit against the Transportation Department, the MTA argued that the federal government does not have the authority to unilaterally kill congestion pricing and pledged to continue collecting tolls until a judge told it not to. In a statement, New York Kathy Hochul said, "We are a nation of laws, not ruled by a king. We'll see you in court."
This has a long way to go before we have an outcome on either side, but let's dive deeper into the numbers on if it was working or not. If in the first week of February, traffic inside the toll zone dropped about 10% compared to the same time last year. There was on average about 50,000 less vehicles entering according to the MTA. So that is a big check in its corner. Also foot traffic, which is a good measure that businesses want to see to make sure that they're still getting enough people to come frequent their shops. That has improved since the tolls took effect as well. Through the end of January, 35.8 million pedestrians entered that major business district in the tolling zone. That's about 5% more than the same period last year. And it's been really freaking cold in New York City too. So those are impacting numbers as well. But on the flip side, this toll had a lot of powerful opponents. One of them is actually the governor of New Jersey. He said you're basically just rerouting traffic into our neck of the woods. That traffic has to go somewhere. You're just putting it on our plate. So he has the ear of Trump as well. A lot of powerful people in New Jersey were not happy with this, which is why Trump kind of made it a campaign promise. This is him trying to, execute on that campaign promise.
And this may be the stiffest legal challenge that congestion pricing has had, but it is certainly not the first. It was hit with lawsuit after lawsuit by New Jersey and others. It survived all of those legal challenges, and it went into effect on January 5th after years and years and years of planning. The chair and chief executive of the MTA said, look, we've been sued everywhere. We've been sued in every federal court and state court east of the Mississippi, and we're batting 1,000. We've won every single time. So we'll see how this court fight plays out against perhaps the most powerful opponent of all, the White House.
One real issue with this, though, is that this plan was supposed to, if congestion pricing goes away, it will really hurt the MTA because they were expecting $1 billion in extra revenue. They were going to use it to fund all these improvements to the subway system. And they've already started borrowing against future toll revenue. So if that gets taken away, it really throws the MTA into limbo. It really puts their plans on, giving a facelift to one of the, most extensive transportation systems in a U.S. city, but also an aging transportation system. So I do think that they are watching nervously and saying, oh no, we've already, started cashing checks from this program. What happens if that, income stream is taken away?
This is history, what we're witnessing, because first of all, this is the first congestion pricing plan that has been implemented by any United States city. It exists in London, in Stockholm, in Singapore, and other places around the globe. But this was the first experiment that happened in the United States. So that was unprecedented. And then what is also unprecedented is the reversal of such a large-scale transportation project by the federal government. This hasn't happened before. If it sounds like a lot of whiplash, that's because you've never experienced something like this in U.S. history. So the magnitude of what is going on is a really big deal because many other cities are watching New York to see whether they want to implement their own congestion pricing plans around the country. Now it moves to court for another drawn-out legal battle.
Apple rolled out a budget-friendly new face to its lineup yesterday, the $599 iPhone 16e. It clocks in at $600 cheaper than Apple's most souped-up iPhone, but will run you $170 more than the iPhone SE it is replacing. What's the extra cash getting you? Say goodbye to the old home button that somehow your mom's phone still has, and say hello to Face ID. It also contains the same A18 chip as the iPhone 16, which is powerful enough to run Apple Intelligence. And there's an updated USB-C charging port. But what has a lot of people excited is a small piece of tech under the hood. Inside the 16e is Apple's first ever in-house cellular chip, which represents the culmination of a years-long effort by Apple to make more of its technology itself to save having to pay billions of dollars to suppliers like Qualcomm. This launch also signals Apple's intention to push into the lower end of the smartphone market, typically dominated by rivals like Google and Samsung. So Neal, one little phone here, but a lot of implications.
Sure. I mean, Apple's iPhones are in a bit of a slump right now. Sales fell about 1% in the holiday quarter. Volume, the amount of actual phones that they're shipping, is pretty stagnant. Everyone, kind of has a phone. They're just upgrading. So at this point, it's selling about 230 million iPhones a year. And that is a number that is not going to budge in the near future. So what they need to do is raise prices to get more revenue. So this is $170 more than the last iPhone SE version. It's still cheaper than its other models, but you're right. This is, I guess, the entry-level model to get people hooked on the Apple ecosystem. And then maybe once they're fed up with their SE, they'll upgrade to a Pro or a Max or whatever they call it these days. That is the hope, to get people, especially in international markets, into the Apple world, and then they'll continue to pay for upgrades later on.
But let's talk about this in-house modem. This is sort of a test run for these chips that allow your phone to connect to cellular providers around the world. What they're doing is trying it out in this cheaper iPhone to see if they can roll it out to their entire suite. And the reason why they've been trying to do this is that Apple's been very reliant on Qualcomm for most of its history, but Qualcomm, charges them, one, money to make the chips, but then also two, they have to pay a royalty of like $6 to $7 on every single iPhone that contains the chip. So over 230 million iPhones, that is billions of dollars we're talking about. So Apple has been slowly chipping away at figuring out how to make this one critical component themselves. It's been a very long process. They hired a bunch of people from Intel's modem division. They hired some people from Qualcomm as well. It's a little contentious because they've been trying to, keep Qualcomm happy while also trying to derive or take away a major source of revenue from it. So this has been a project that's been ongoing. We've seen them do it with their actual chips that power the phone. Now they're trying to do it with their cellular chips as well.
Let's talk about the marketing strategy. Basically, when Apple has released a product in the past, there's been a huge pageantry around it. They have a huge event. They do keynote and very buzzy marketing around product launches. This one, they just issued a press release, and it went a little under the radar. They didn't hype up this modem at all, which I don't know if it's even possible to hype up a modem, but they didn't do it, and they kind of let this fly under the radar a bit. What do you think is behind that particular strategy?
I mean, it's not necessarily that exciting of a project because it is just a more expensive entry-level version of their phone, and it doesn't come with a ton of bells and whistles. Most of the bells and whistles are actually stripped away. Like, you're not going to get those higher-end features that you come to expect. It doesn't have the dynamic island at the top. It doesn't have the MagSafe wireless charging. It only has one back camera. So if you make a big deal out of it, some people might say, wait, you're just releasing a less souped-up iPhone. Why should I be excited about that? So I do think the reason why we're talking about it is because of the modem and what it represents for Apple going forward. But a modem is not exciting for consumers, which is why they didn't make a huge deal about it. Nikola Motors, an electric truck company that once had a market cap higher than Ford, filed for bankruptcy yesterday, completing its slow downhill roll towards the EV junkyard. This company's worth eulogizing, though, not for its contributions to the EV industry, but for its insane backstory. Nikola was founded by Trevor Milton amidst the green auto investment boom that characterized the early part of the COVID pandemic. It promised semi-trucks that would run on environmentally friendly hydrogen and a network of fueling stations along major interstate corridors to keep everything moving. When it went public via SPAC, it reported orders for 14,000 of its hydrogen fuel cell trucks. However, the famed short seller Hindenburg soon took notice and released a report that Nikola was likely overhyping its business. The report also made the sensationalist claim that in some of its promotional videos, Nikola rolled a truck down a hill and passed it off as moving under its own volition, which prosecutors found to be true. Needless to say, instead of ushering in a green revolution in trucking, Trevor Milton was convicted of securities fraud in 2022 for allegedly misleading investors, and Nikola is now a poster child for meme stock froth and founder megalomania. What a downfall, Neal.
This was a mess of a company. They were on their fourth CEO in as many years. They were losing hundreds of thousands of dollars on every truck they sold, which they weren't selling many trucks at all, even despite ramping up production. It was a symbol of the excesses of the SPAC boom that we had in 2021 and the EV boom that has faltered from both macro conditions because higher interest rates, less demand for EVs than what was expected, but also missteps on the part of these individual companies that thinking that they could be the next Tesla and not realizing the capital that was required. And many EV companies have been accused of fraud and accounting shenanigans. And clearly this was a business model that didn't work for Nikola, but also many other EV startups in the space.
Yeah, there was almost two factors that sunk Nikola. One was Trevor Milton was literally, defrauding investors by, I remember when this happened, when their video of this truck, steaming down the highway, Hindenburg kind of said, we found out that they can't actually drive these trucks. These trucks don't work. They are literally using gravity and passing it off as, self-powered trucks. So that was this whole separate issue. But then there's also just normal startup problems. They're saying its current CEO cited the fact that it's really hard to find hydrogen fuel cell parts because it's just not a big market. Also,
maybe you should have thought about that before.
I know, but I think these are things that they thought they could just build, or like the industry would grow alongside. So yeah, some of it was just a miscalculation of that. All told, though, this was a money lighting on fire machine. It's lost $3.6 billion in capital. It's just been literally setting money on fire, and it joins, that graveyard. I mean, the Fisker Motors of the world, the Lordstown Motors of the world, these companies that thought they were going to be Tesla and instead are just a cautionary tale.
There are a few walking dead EV startups. One of them is Rivian. Their share price is about a tenth of where it was in late 2021, but they produce pretty well-regarded electric pickups and SUVs, so they're still kicking. And then Lucid Motors is another EV startup that is still around. It makes luxury electric cars and SUVs at the top end of the market. Just look at their share price this morning. It's down 95% from their peak.
Up next, hold on to your frontal lobes. It's Neal's Numbers.
Welcome to Neal's Numbers, the segment where I share 3 stats from the week's news that will turn you into the most insufferable know-it-all. For my first number, how much has DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, saved American taxpayers? It depends on who you ask. About a month into its effort to slash fraud and waste, Elon Musk's cost-cutting outfit says it's saved $55 billion in federal spending. But look closer and things get a little more suspect. The DOGE website itself only accounts for $16.6 billion of the $55 billion claimed to have been saved. And that $16 billion also comes with an asterisk because there is a major error. DOGE mislabeled a contract as costing $8 billion, when in reality, that contract cost $8 million. So when you do all the math, the total savings generated by DOGE amount to about $8.6 billion, a fraction of what had been broadcast. So how'd the M and the B get screwed up? In September 2022, D&G Support Services was awarded a contract to provide services for the Office of Diversity and Civil Rights within U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE. The original value was listed at $8 billion, and it stayed that way for years, until last month when it was adjusted to the correct amount of $8 million. It certainly was just an $8 million contract because ICE's entire budget is around $9 billion, so an $8 billion contract is just not feasible. Either way, as Bloomberg notes, this sus accounting raises questions about DOGE's reliability and accountability.
Yeah, this is the transparency side of DOGE that, they invited when they put this website up. If you want to show their work, people are going to start, parsing through that work. And whether it was actually, you could credit DOGE and say, wait a second, they actually found a government contract that was mislabeled, that was soon changed right before, the inauguration. What is clear, though, that $8 billion is certainly not even close to what this contract could possibly be worth. Also, $8 million is the upper bound on what you could hypothetically say you saved as well, because $2.5 million has already been spent on that $8 million contract. So it just shows that when you're going line by line and trying to cancel and add up these savings, you're going to run into some of these hurdles. Maybe it's a mislabeled contract. Maybe it is, just an over-exaggeration. But I do think that they thought they found the perfect DOGE fodder here. And if you dig a little deeper, it wasn't the perfect DOGE fodder.
And Elon Musk has said himself that some things will be incorrect and should be corrected. But when you're putting out false numbers consistently like this and overinflating your impact on, this is the budget's trillions of dollars, and to say you found, a few billion, you're going to lose trust with the public about your effort. My next number is 3, which is how many companies control an estimated 70 to 80% of the fire truck manufacturing market. This stunning industry concentration, reported by the New York Times, was on full display during the LA fires last month, when many firefighters who could have been deployed to the front lines were not able to get there because dozens of fire trucks were out of service, accumulating rust at the city maintenance yard. Los Angeles Fire Chief Kristen Crowley said that about 100 fire vehicles were out of service in January, which blunted blunted their efforts to control the blazes. Fire leaders across the country say recent industry consolidation in fire truck manufacturing has caused higher prices and long delivery delays, impeding their ability to do their jobs. Tack on COVID, which caused major supply chain disruptions and worker shortages, and the situation at firehouses has become dire. Auditors in Atlanta found that more than a third of the city's firefighting fleet was out of commission. Chicago firefighters held a satirical birthday party for a 30-year-old engine that had double its lifespan.
Yeah, this is a interesting industry. One, because fire truck manufacturing is an incredibly bespoke process. Every single fire department wants their truck made to their specific specifications. And so therefore, it's not something that you can just mass produce like, a normal automobile. And then also, it is a very consolidated industry. If you look at the top name there, it's called Rev Group. It controls 30% of the fire market, but then you go down the list and 3 of the largest companies control around 70 to 80% of the market. And if you dig into those companies' financials, they have backlogs stretching years and billions of dollars of orders, but there's just not a ton of rush to fulfill those orders because, again, it's not a very competitive marketplace. So a lot of these fire stations are looking around and they're making do with what they have. They're making do with 30-year-old fire trucks. They're throwing birthdays for these fire trucks because they are forced to, because no new fire trucks are coming to replace their old ones.
For my final number, a movie you've probably never heard of just surpassed Pixar's Inside Out 2 to become the highest-grossing animated film of all time. Ne Zha 2, a Chinese film about a monster-fighting demonic child, has earned $1.7 billion since its debut over the Lunar New Year holiday, making it not only the #1 animated film ever, and not only the #1 Chinese film ever, but also the 8th biggest film in history. It's an astonishing result for a homegrown Chinese movie, considering that Ne Zha 2 is the only film in the top 20 all-time box office list whose original language is not English. And even more remarkable, very few people internationally have seen it. Over 99% of its box office income has come from mainland China, making it the biggest haul ever in a single country by $600 million. That was a lot of superlatives, but Ne Zha 2's success is unprecedented, and it shows the power of the Chinese consumer market when things are clicking. There is a good chance that this will be the highest grossing movie of 2025, depending on how Avatar 3 does later this year.
This is a culmination of a trend that has really emerged over the past decade. If you go back to 2012, 7 of the top 10 releases in China were from Hollywood, were from American studios. But then you go back to last year, no American movie broke the list of the top 10 highest grossing movies in the China. And it really just speaks to the emergence of China's movie-making machine. They are, 1, improving in quality, and 2, showing that it reflects wider societal issues as well. This is a movie that is based on a 16th century story from Chinese culture. And so audiences, domestic audiences, are showing out in droves. 1, just showing their national support for stories like this. And then 2, just showing that these movies are good movies and they do draw in audiences in droves at this point. It's coming to America too. You looked at the showtimes.
I'd love to see it.
It's pretty widely distributed within New York City, so we should give that a try.
Let's sprint to the finish with some final headlines. U.S. support for Ukraine in their war against Russia has never been more precarious. One day after President Trump blamed Ukraine for starting the war, when in fact Russia invaded Ukraine unprovoked, he laced into Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky, calling him a dictator without elections, and claimed he misused U.S. aid. The anti-Zelensky rant on social media comes as the Trump administration is rapidly improving relations with Russia, holding high-level talks this week about resolving the war that sidelined Ukraine and European leaders. Critics blasted Trump for repeating what is essentially Russian propaganda. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer said it is disgusting to see an American president turn against one of our friends and openly side with a thug like Vladimir Putin.
You are seeing a widening gap between the U.S. and Ukraine. Obviously, the U.S. has been a huge backer of Ukraine's efforts against Russia, but Trump has said on the campaign trail and since he's taken office that he quickly wants to settle this war, but he's taken a turn to increasingly blaming Ukraine and Zelensky personally and spoken with Putin about ways to end it. So we've entered into this balancing act where Zelensky does want to push back against these claims thrown his way without bad-mouthing the backer of, its biggest, its biggest backer, while also trying to end the war. So it's a very precarious situation. While Apple was busy announcing a cheaper iPhone, Microsoft was cooking up an entirely new state of matter. It unveiled a quantum computing chip yesterday that it says is powered by 8 topological qubits, an exotic form of matter that is not based on a solid, liquid, or gas. The idea is for this new phase of physical existence to be harnessed to solve mathematical and scientific problems, eventually bringing quantum computing into the mainstream. This sparks two big quantum breakthroughs in just a few months. In December, Google unveiled its own quantum computer that needed just a few minutes to solve a calculation that would take most supercomputers 10 septillion years to finish. And many believe that Microsoft's new technology could leapfrog that chip. Neal, now many believe that instead of decades, it could just be years until we get viable commercial applications of quantum computing.
Still, guys, go travel the world. We got the asteroid coming in 2032. You're not going to be able to get a quantum computer by then. But this is a tremendous breakthrough, and we'll see the quantum computer arms race is on before, we're all blown to smithereens in a few years. Let's say you were on a flight that crash landed and flipped upside down while skidding down the runway. How much do you think the airline should pay you for your troubles? For the passengers who survived that ordeal on Monday in Toronto, the answer is $30,000. Delta Airlines, which operated the flight that went belly up, said it was offering $30K to each passenger aboard the flight with, quote, no strings attached and does not affect rights. Interesting to compare that to what Alaska Airline offered passengers on its flight last year when that door panel blew out. That was $1,500.
If all 76 passengers on that Delta flight took up its offer, it would cost Delta $2.3 million in total, which feels small for, how large that accident was. But you're right. When you compare it to the Alaska Airlines flight, it is substantially more. I also went back and looked at, remember the miracle on the Hudson flight in 2009? Those passengers got $5,000. I mean, I guess that's not inflation adjusted, but that was $5,000 going towards replacing possessions lost, not necessarily as an act of goodwill. So in the grand scheme of things, $30,000 is a lot of money, but also I'm not sure if it's enough for given what those passengers went through. The SS United States, once a great symbol of American maritime engineering, it's making its way beneath the sky blue waters off the Gulf Coast of Florida. No, it didn't run aground on some reef. In fact, the ocean liner is set to become a reef itself. A $10 million project aims to create a new habitat for marine life by sinking the ship while also hoping to boost tourism and fishing in the process. The transformation from a 990-foot-long mid-20th century marvel that carried 4 presidents across the Atlantic into an environmentally sound reef will take about 2 years and will include the removal of hazardous materials like fuel still sitting in its tanks. But it will give second life to the once proud ship that to this day is the largest passenger ship ever built in America.
And it's super fast. It crossed the Atlantic Ocean in 3 days, 10 hours, and 40 minutes, which maybe doesn't sound fast because we can do it in about 5 hours in a plane now, but that still holds the records to this day for the transatlantic, for an ocean liner crossing. So pretty cool ship, and I didn't know this was a thing where they deliberately sink ships to create artificial reefs so people can go scuba diving, but seems like a very cool use for this ship that I've seen in South Philadelphia. And anyone who drives on 95 or is around Philadelphia, through there, you see this, this rusting ship, and it looks like they're going to put it to some interesting use. But I have a question for you, Toby. What does SS stand for? This is the SS United States. Maybe I know we just got after Neal's numbers, but I still want to teach people things. And I didn't know this before looking it up. The SS stands for steamship.
I was going to guess super ship, so I thought that was a dumb guess. But
back in the 19th century, there was, they wanted to, the marketing folks at these ocean liners wanted to distinguish from the wind-powered ships that came before it, so they called it steamship, and then it also came to represent what they call screw steamers, another SS, or single screw steamship. So the SS stands for steamship.
A bonus Neal's fact right there.
Let's wrap it up there. Thanks so much for starting your morning with us, and have a wonderful Thursday. For any questions, comments, or feedback, send an email to morningbrew@morningbrew.com. And if you're enjoying the show, share it with a friend, family member, or coworker. Toby, who should everyone listening share it with today?
This one goes out to all the MBDOGs. If you've been here for 2 years now, first, thank you. But you've probably told all of your immediate friends about your favorite morning show. So let's dig deep here. Hit up your exes, text your third cousins twice removed, and knock on your technologically illiterate 70-year-old neighbor's door. bottom of the barrel stuff, but thank you for your loyalty.
Let's roll the credits. Emily Milliron is our executive producer. Raymond Liu is our producer. Olivia Graham is our associate producer. Uchenna Ogu is our technical director. Scoop Stardaris is on audio. Hair and Makeup is considering whether to go to Boston for the U.S.-Canada hockey game tonight. Only problem, tickets for the Four Nations Face-Off title game are rivaling the Super Bowl, costing upwards of $4,000. I say YOLO. Devin Emery is our chief content officer, and our show is a production of Morning Brew.
Great show today, Neal. Let's run it back tomorrow.